Welcome to my channel where shadows conceal lethal intentions and leaders balance on the knife's edge between allegiance and betrayal. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and brace yourself, because what unfolded at the West African Peace Summit was no mere diplomatic hiccup. It was a meticulously orchestrated ambush. But what the schemers didn't foresee was that Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso, had anticipated their moves. The summit was staged at Dar Sagal, a marble stronghold of a hotel named La Santo, chosen to project unity. Towering white facades, a tiled courtyard with a fountain sculpted into entwined hands, and the promise of security. 14 heads of state arrived shielded by heavy protocol, each bearing the weight of regional tensions, simmering conflicts, and unspoken alliances. Traoré's attendance alone radiated unease. He had expelled foreign troops and altered power, equations across West Africa. Yet he came unannounced. No motorcade, no ostentation, only 3 aides, 2 guards, and an intelligence chief named Dio, who never removed his leather gloves. From the outset, something felt askew. The summit chamber, warm and circular, had been arranged without customary formality. Nameplates were shuffled, and Traoré's seat was relocated from its intended position beside Guinea-Bissau's head to a spot wedged between ministers from nations he hadn't addressed in months. 2 glasses of water rested before each delegate, poured before they entered. Harmless to most, but not to Traoré. As other leaders drifted in, their greeting smiles concealed sharpened intentions. He leaned toward Dio and murmured, "Can you feel it?" Dio's eyes swept the room, paused briefly, and gave a curt nod. "It's in the rhythm. Everything's out of sync." The opening ceremony began with the expected overtures, pleas for cooperation, denouncements of external meddling, and scripted unity. But Traoré's gaze never wavered from the table. He studied the water glasses, identical condensation on each, but one sat exactly 8 millimeters higher. Not an accident, but a deliberate signal. Someone intended not to assassinate, haphazardly, but to send a message. Remove his name from the ledger. Midway through the Ivorian envoy's address, Traoré extended his hand toward the right glass, the safer option, but halted a heartbeat away and diverted his question to the delegate next to him, Minister Diallo of Niger. "Tell me, do you find the water here to your satisfaction?" Diallo froze, jaw tightening, eyes flickering. With forced composure, he lifted his own glass and took a measured sip. A grave mistake. Within moments, his complexion drained, words slurred, and muscles constricted. By the time medics arrived, Diallo was convulsing, incapacitated enough to be escorted out on a stretcher. The chamber erupted into alarm. Microphones were cut, doors sealed, whispered accusations jagged into thin air. Yet Traoré remained seated, unperturbed, eyes scanning not for reaction but for absence, looking for those whose gazes shifted too deliberately, those whose breaths faltered. He already knew the true operation was not aimed at this minister. He was merely collateral, a pawn. The real quarry was whoever stirred next. Minutes later, the remaining heads returned to their seats, spines stiffer, hearts measured, each pretending not to wonder if their own glass held poison. But Traoré sat still, fingers pressed together atop the table, calculating. This stage was now theirs to command. Without apparent agitation, he rose and announced, "We will recess for fresh air." Polite ambiguity masked his certainty. Exiting, down the marble corridor with his security detail, he slipped into a private diplomatic suite sealed against eavesdropping. Once inside, he dismissed the guards and bolted the doors, facing the 3 individuals he trusted most. Dio, his intelligence chief, Captain Utara, head of personal security, and Pulsi, his precocious aide responsible for communications. Traoré said nothing. Silence carried a sharper edge than accusation. They recognized at once that he had seen something. He placed both untouched water glasses on a side table and turned to them, voice low yet steely. "Which one of you realized this before I did?" The question draped the room in ice. Dio predictably stepped forward first, voice measured. "Sir, I noticed the seating irregularities. I sensed a deviation but had no confirmation, only suspicion. Utara, arms crossed, pilot eyes narrowed, offered defensiveness. I oversaw catering clearance. All consumables were sealed when delivered. If contamination occurred, it happened after reaching the summit room, or the hotel staff outmaneuvered us. Pulsey remained silent, studying his shoelaces, betraying nothing. But Traoré needed more than words. He needed action. Proof. He opened a sideboard, withdrew a freshly sealed bottle of mineral water, poured 3 glasses, and set one before each team member. Leaving no room for subterfuge, he said simply, "Drink." Dio lifted his glass without hesitation, expression unreadable. Utara inhaled deeply, sniffed his water, and then obeyed, lips tightening. Pulsey paused, hesitated, and reached instead for a glass already on a nearby table, the same glass used by the departed minister. It looked identical, chilled with condensation and indistinguishably placed. But this was a test. Pulsey's hesitation was a confession in itself. Traoré's gaze cut through the haze. "You're too bright to be that reckless. Who supplied the vial?" Pulsey trembled, silent, gaze fixed on the floor. Dio produced a folded paper from his inner pocket, a decrypted log from that morning detailing an unusual data burst transmitted from a burner phone 2 floors beneath the summit. They had triangulated the source. The code identified Pulsey's burner as the sender, along with a diplomatic pouch that arrived at 3:14 a.m., tagged as medical supplies, absent from any manifest. Traoré stepped closer, voice softer yet unyielding. "You knew the real objective wasn't murder but scandal, a tool to discredit us. You wanted to force me from power without blood on your hands." Pulsey's eyes glistened. "They assured me no one would die. It was only to provoke uproar, to weaken your standing at home. I had no choice." Traoré's expression remained impassive. "Who are they?" Pulsey's cheeks flushed. He shook his head. "Names don't matter anymore. Phase 2 is already in motion." That admission marked the turning point. Dio signaled to his embedded cyber ops team to lock internal frequencies and cross-reference hotel staff rosters with known operatives. Utara dispatched silent signals to rooftop overwatch units. Traoré stepped into an adjoining room, slid open a leather briefcase, and extracted a dossier labeled in his handwriting, "Continuum Disruption." Under a single lamp were 3 items: a satellite image of a sealed oil terminal on the Sierra Leone coast, the floor plan of Los Santos kitchen, and a photograph of a man posing as a foreign defense advisor, now attached discreetly to a neighboring delegation. The poisoning had been a ruse. While every eye on the summit fixated on water glasses and waiting staff, the true coup unfolded in whispered narrative, a media-driven plot designed to paint Traoré as unstable, paranoid, unfit to govern. But Kosi's partial confession, combined with Dio's forensics, meant the clock now worked for Traoré, not his enemies. He would act first. That evening, when the summit reconvened in the grand banquet hall, the tension was palpable. Golden chandeliers cast a warm glow over imported orchid centerpieces, while polished marble floors reflected glints of candlelight. Beneath the surface polish, intelligence teams swept for bioagents and heat signatures in the crawlspace. Rooftop snipers watched adjacent rooftops long cleared. But none of this mattered to the summit guests, who entered with stiff formality, resumes of unity unchanged. When Traoré stepped in, he wore not the Western-tailored suit of his peers, but a deep indigo robe adorned with moss-green embroidery, his grandfather's ceremonial weave. At his side stood Dio, stoic and unreadable. Traoré's own seat had been shifted again, this time directly facing the media's vantage point slightly off-center. He offered no protest. He wanted them to believe they had forced him into the periphery. As servers glided through the hall, glinting crystal flutes pre-filled with red Bordeaux vintage offered for the traditional toast. "May peace fill our cup as swiftly as fear drains our hope." Traoré's eyes watched the delegates, not the wine. Then he rose, cutting through the intricate choreography of protocol. Cradling not a crystal flute, but a carved wooden cup bound in bronze wire, centuries old, he paused. The room held its breath. Cameras pivoted, lenses zoomed, protocol shattered, like fragile glass. He lifted the cup and spoke, voice unwavering. Before we partake in ritual, I ask, how many of you know the story of Sanfi, the twice saved? Silence reigned. No one dared acknowledge. Sanfi was a shepherd whose well was poisoned once, and still he survived by chance. When it happened a second time, he survived by memory, by recalling the bitter taste of betrayal on his tongue. He learned to discern the faintest shift in purity. Traoré inverted the wooden cup and placed it slowly on the table, flat and empty. Tonight, I drink nothing crafted by strangers. Peace cannot be lifted in a toast. It must be swallowed, in truth. The hall convulsed in near silence. Forks hovered mid-air. A delegate from Sierra Leone dropped his napkin, muttering a curse. Cameras caught every flinch, every tightened jaw. Moments stretched like fragile threads. Then 3 delegates rose. Sierra Leone's envoy first, followed seconds later by 2 others, exiting through the ornate doors, their faces masks of anger and humiliation. Live streams magnified their departure around the world. Traoré resumed his seat, adding as an afterthought, "You thought I wouldn't note the difference between plastic and wood, between truth and illusion, but I've been tasting betrayal my entire life." The stunned toastmaster stammered into the microphone, but the gravity had broken the spell. No crystal flutes clinked. No scripted phrases echoed. The silence reverberated as though the entire summit had inhaled and refused to exhale. Outside, the hall, 3 encrypted feeds from Ghana-based neutral media channels now carried the full scene to millions, unfiltered. By dawn, news agencies worldwide dissected Traoré's act. Heroism to some, reckless defiance to others. 3 days later, global attention shifted to a market plunge in Frankfurt, a royal scandal in Lagos, and an earthquake on the Red Sea coast. But in Ouagadougou, an undercurrent surged. Walls whispered. Patterns emerged. In the Ministry of Memory, plain, unassuming building housing decades of treaties, rumor archives, and elders' songs that once foretold drought, Traoré stood alone on the rooftop at dawn. He held a letter scrawled on coarse local parchment, its edges ember red and blurred ink. No signature, no seal, only a spiral symbol in the margin. Within was a single name, the Minister of Trade from a foreign partner nation, whose stillness at the poisoned glass had betrayed no reaction. This was a foe cloaked in alliance but steeped in coercive promises. The letter was no indictment. It was a signal. That morning, Traoré handed the parchment to Dio. Without a word, Dio understood. The quiet machinery of his network activated. Market analysts in Lagos noticed suspicious trades tied to that minister's companies. Intelligence assets in Accra flagged encrypted correspondence to a shell nonprofit. By midday, the minister's secure channels crackled with unexplained technical failures. Interviews scheduled with international press vanished from the docket without explanation. Back home, journalists found website logins canceled, social media accounts locked. Then came the resignation. Quietly submitted that evening. No scandalous press release, no medical excuse. Insiders whispered the truth. No illness had ailed him. Instead, he was eclipsed by Traoré's silent, relentless reckoning. In Burkina Faso, the government's statement was muted. No triumphant fanfare. This was a victory meant to echo in subtle reverberations, not erupt in headlines. Traoré's power stemmed not from titles, but from a tapestry of trust woven in shadow. That afternoon, he walked barefoot through rural hamlets, greeted blacksmiths forging iron, storytellers beneath baobabs, children playing in dust. No helicopters, no presidential motorcade, just a man listening to long memories. Villagers did, not whisper president, but keeper of the well, recalling how their leader had resisted poison not only in water, but in narrative. 7 days after the summit, when a hush fell over Dar Sagal that night, Traoré returned to the fountain of entwined hands. No cameras followed. No aides announced him. He poured water from a small gourd, drawn from a sacred spring in his homeland, into the marble basin. The basin pulsed once like a silent heartbeat beneath stone. He whispered, "The well is pure again," then turned and left. In that moment, he was more than a head of state. He had become a guardian of collective memory, a man who tasted betrayal and came to understand that the sharpest weapon is memory itself. Beyond city lights, diplomats recalibrated alliances, embassies reviewed security protocols, journalists rewrote headlines. But in remote villages, the tale of Ibrahim Traoré's defiance passed from mouth to ear across firelight. They spoke not of bombs or guns, but of water, how a single glass overturned the axes of power. Back on this channel, we will continue to uncover the hidden maneuvers of high-stakes diplomacy and clandestine plots. If this story gripped you, subscribe, like, and share. Because the next threat may already be brewing in silence, and sometimes the subtlest dagger strikes when you least expect it. Until next time, drink with intention.